we all told him, you know, someone is going to be killed in this thing, and you've got to not do it.
Piece of debris that were recovered from the ocean floor arrived at a Canadian port today. The Titan submersible suffered a catastrophic implosion as it carried 5 people to the depths of the Atlantic. There were no survivors.
Hi guys! Since the tragic Oceangate Titan accident, we've all been wondering, how did it happen? What happened? And why did it happen? But you know, we're calling it an accident, but can you really call it an accident if there have been so many warnings overlooked and safety precautions just being ignored? So that's the topic of my video today, and there have been 7 major safety blunders that have just simply been overlooked by the CEO Stockton Rush. And he didn't even make this a secret. He was speaking about it out, open, loud in an interview. He makes it sound like, oh, come on, don't be a softie, so don't pee in your pants, just get in that sub and let's go, right? Why waste our time with too many precautions or safety checks, or even, you know, have it inspected by a governing authority or by some experts, and even the experts who were there, the warnings, just let's ignore them. Listen to that interview.
I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I think it was General MacArthur said, you're remembered for the rules you break. And, you know, I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
There was concern about the Titan's design. A former employee says that when he raised safety concerns, Rush fired him. That same year, a group of submersible engineers urged Rush to seek certification of the Titan by a safety agency. Rush declined, saying that regulation would stifle innovation.
At some point, safety just is pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed.
It is one thing if you go down yourself to explore and you build that sub for yourself and you take the risk, it's your own life. But if you make that a tourist operation, I think this is very, very critical what he has done. As you just heard Stockton Rush say, there should be limits to safety precautions. Yeah, there were limits, and let's talk about these 7 limits that he ignored. So number 1 is a long delay in raising the alarm. So what does that mean? So the Titan submersible has lost contact to the mothership, the Ocean Prince, that was on above the sea level, less than 2 hours into the expedition down to the Titanic. Yet Oceangate failed to alert the authorities until 8 hours after. When they lost contact, yes, panic erupted on the Polar Prince. But however, the US Coast Guard was not alerted until 8 hours after the vessel lost the communications. With 5 tourists on board, you wait 8 hours? Why? We can speculate about this. If you have seen my video about the last 20 minutes, it appears that because the CEO was in the sub, that the Polar Prince didn't really dare to criticize or to give too detailed instructions. You know, they were kind of asking him, well, do you need to slow down? You're descending very fast, sort of thing. But then when they didn't receive an answer, they basically let this slide. So it could have been that they thought, well, maybe it's just a communication issue. They had technical issues in the past a lot. So they might have thought, if we alert authorities right now, this might be bad press for the whole project. So they kept it quiet and they thought, well, maybe it'll reappear like it did in the past, right? Number 2, there was a lawsuit over the submersible's safety. It's been revealed that Oceangate was involved in a huge lawsuit over fears about safety issues. An ex-employee, David Lockridge, claims he was fired after he raised his concerns, and he demanded more rigorous safety checks be put in place on the submersible. Court documents have showed that he complained that the vessel was not capable of descending to the extreme depth necessary to view the Titanic wreckage. The legal files show Oceangate sued Lockridge, who was responsible for the safety of all crew and clients, for disclosing confidential information about the Titan. So what happened then? Lockridge then filed a counterclaim alleging that he had been wrongfully fired from his role over being a whistleblower about the quality and safety of the vessel. So in November 2018, the case settled out of court. So what can we say about that? After that settlement, has Stockton Rush increased the safety? From reports that have surfaced, it seems not. Nothing has been changed on the vessel. And then number 3, the submersible had vanished in a chilling way. It just disappeared. And that might explain why when the Titanic lost contact, they waited 8 hours to alert authorities, because it had happened before. That thing was so faulty, right? So nobody was surprised. So there was a CBS reporter, David Polk. He was on the sub, and he said the submersible, sorry, I got a lot of critics for that from my subscribers and from people in the comments. So you're right, it's a submersible, not a submarine. There's a difference. So the reporter, David Polk, said the sub went lost for several hours.
That's the last we'll be seeing of land for 8 days.
The sub with this game controller.
I was a little nervous.
An experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign? Oh,
Take your shoes off, that's customary.
okay. Wow.
Inside, the sub has about as much room as a minivan.
So this is not your grandfather's submersible. We only have one button, that's it. It should be like an elevator. You know, it shouldn't take a lot of skill.
It's got one button, and that's it.
He was excited to see the Titanic, and then he said the vessel was lost because of bad weather, and that was last summer. So passengers on the trip, including that CBS reporter, never had the chance to see the shipwreck after they lost communication with the surface ship. In the resurfaced clip of the expedition, the reporter says, there is no GPS underwater, so the surface ship is supposed to guide the ship to the shipwreck by sending messages. But how do you do that if you have lost contact? For me, this is wow. So no GPS, nothing? You're completely blind when you lose communication with the polar prince on top? I mean, you have to realize down there in the depth of the ocean, it is dark. You have no way to orient yourself. So why didn't it have GPS or any other form of backup communication or navigation? This is crazy. So on this specific dive, they said communication somehow broke down and the sub never found the wreck. And there's a CBS clip from that dive. There was a guy, he's an investment firm CEO, Shrenik Baldota. Just on a side note, why does everyone who was on that submersible have such complicated names to pronounce? Just on a side note. So he can be heard when he was on the 2022 voyage saying, we were lost for 2.5 hours. I'll leave it at that. We can all draw our conclusions. But to me, it explains quite a bit about why there has been silence for so long. The number 4 safety blunder is it's steered by a gaming controller. It's a modified video game controller that can be operated by any of the passengers, which is kind of, okay, I would think if the pilot has a heart attack, who gets us back to the surface so you can operate that game controller? But it is also kind of scary if some of the passengers takes the game controller and does whatever with it, right? When you don't know what steers what. So I don't know. So you got to imagine this is a vessel that is 22 feet long and 9 feet wide. And to me, it's kind of bizarre that it's steered by a regular game controller. And so, yeah. As I mentioned before, the sub does not have its own GPS system and is guided by text messages exchanged using an acoustic system with a team waiting helplessly above water. So there's strange footage from inside the vessel that reveals that it is run by an Xbox style controller, and yeah, it can mostly be operated by just using one button. In the meantime, yes, there have been reports that the Navy uses game controllers as well, but I don't think we can compare that because their vessels and crafts are way more advanced, tested, and approved. So the reporter that traveled on the Titan, he shared his concerns over some components of the sub, and he said that they seemed off the shelf, sort of improvised. So he told the BBC, you steer the sub with an Xbox game controller and some of the ballast is built from abandoned construction pipes. What? Okay. Sounds weird. And then he said, and the inside lighting was bought from a camping shop. Oh, very reliable. We all know, if you have been camping, how reliable that stuff is, right?
I got these from Camper World.
He also expressed another concern that there is no way to escape the inside of the sub without external help. The passengers are sealed within the main cabin by hefty bolts secured from the outside and have to be removed using external crew. And he said there is no backup, there is no escape pod. It's get to the surface or die. Number 5, this thing did not have an emergency distress beacon. What? So the reporter also revealed that he seriously questioned the company's emergency system when the vessel was lost in 2022. He said the surface vessel was not carrying a distress beacon, which is activated by boaters in emergency situations. So why don't you have something like this? When activated, this beacon alerts a worldwide search and rescue network designed to send rescuers to the boat's exact location very, very quickly. And it's proven to save lives. So Polk said further, this submersible does not have any kind of beacon like that. On my expedition last summer, they did indeed get lost, and adding such a beacon was discussed. So why did they not do it? Why? Number 6, and this is a major one for me, the submersible was not regulated. So the sub operators in the past have explained that the Titan had not been approved by any regulatory body. So tourists paid almost $200,000 to take part in the expedition, but they did have to sign a contract before boarding. So passengers were made to acknowledge that the submarine is an experimental vessel. So the chilling contract also states that their trip could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, and death. While I understand that you always have a waiver like this and that there's always stuff in there that talks about potential damage and death and whatever, but why can't you make it as safe as possible if experts actually point out deficiencies to you? Why ignoring it and just take your chances? And number 7, that's the haunting accounts of ex-passengers, what they have reported, how it was being in that sub and going down there to the Titanic. So there were previous private guests and journalists who risked their life to make the trip down to the Titanic. They have told tales of radio failures, flickering lights while on board of the Titan. Mike Reiss, who works on the classic US TV animated show The Simpsons, made the trip last year on the sub and said communication failures were common.
When we touched bottom, and then we had to spend the next 2.5 hours just sailing around the ocean floor looking for the Titanic. We knew it was there. We knew it was 500 yards away, but it was complete darkness, and we had no real guide. And so we just sailed for hours, and at any moment, you only get 3 hours on the bottom of the ocean. And at 2.5 hours in, they're about to just wrap the whole mission, and we wouldn't have seen the Titanic. And we really just stumbled on it. It popped into view, and we literally only had enough time for the Instagram experience. The one scary element of the whole voyage is the idea that to go back up, they push a lever that releases these lead weights, and the weights fall off, and then you bob to the surface like a cork. And that's how simple the whole trip is. You sink like a stone, and then you bob up like a cork. And I just thought, if something goes wrong with that lever, that switch, and doesn't release the lead weights, I don't know what else you can do. You're just stuck. You obviously can't get out of the sub and do it manually.
Was there ever a communication problem that you had in your experience between what was going on inside the sub, trying to contact people
at the surface?
At the surface?
There is, I must say, I took 4 different dives, 3 in New York Harbor, and then the one to the Titanic. And there were always communication issues. You would lose contact sporadically, and it's nothing I blame the sub for. I blame deep water for it. It just seems to go with the territory, that communication would go in and out. And then there was also, literal communication was a problem, where when we were looking for the sub, when we were looking for the Titanic, we were getting all this advice from the surface going, turn left at this rock. And we would go, there is no rock. They kept feeding us information that didn't correspond to where we were exactly.
So how can you keep going down there if communication failures are common? When you do not have a GPS navigation system and you rely on communication to A, find the wreckage, but B, also find your way back up. I really, really do not get it. So Mike Reiss said, I have taken 3 different dives with this company, 1 at the Titanic and 2 others, and you almost always lost communication, and you are at the mercy of weather. So again, this further explains why when the Titan was lost this June, why they didn't call for help for 8 hours, because it's been happening all the time. Another passenger, Renata Rojas, a banker who visited the wreckage last July, described what happened when sonar failed during her trip. She said, you have to find a way to communicate and navigate in the bottom of the ocean. Sometimes you don't have communications. You have maybe just one system instead of all 3. Some of the lights may flicker, the battery might be low, and you need to go to the surface. Okay, let's say we acknowledge that it's an experimental submersible. But when you encounter problems on an ongoing base, why don't you fix them before you put civilians back on the sub? That's my question. So guys, if you're interested in the Titan Oceangate topic, check out my playlist, Titan Oceangate. I put the link in the description. There's a lot of other videos about that topic. And if you made it that far, if you liked this video, it would be awesome if you could help me out and subscribe. Click the like button and the notification bell. And I hope to see you soon in my next video. Thank you so much. Check out these videos here. Bye bye.